She said it loud enough for the room to hear. "I'd rather kiss my dog than kiss you." The laughter came fast, sharp, practiced, expensive. People who measure worth in square footage and last names stared at me like I'd finally learned my place. I smiled, not because it didn't hurt, but because hurt is a compass. It points you to what matters and what must end. While they cheered the punchline, I counted exits, clocks, and clauses, little levers most people never notice until they're pulled. By midnight, I had 3, not fists, not threats, terms, the kind you sign without reading, the kind that let a man quietly turn off the lights in a glass palace without breaking a single window. You want romance? This isn't that. This is respect, and what happens when it dies in public. By morning, the music was still in someone's stories, but the money had stopped moving. The brand still glittered, the engine didn't. You heard the joke. Stay, and I'll show you where the wires were. I met her under a white gallery skylight in Soho, a pop-up that smelled like new leather and champagne. She didn't just enter rooms, she arranged them. The crowd pivoted without being asked. The photographer found her like a plant finds sun. She lifted a bag and spoke about grain, edge paint, and why women don't buy logos. They buy stories. I said stories need a spine. She looked at me the way people look at an answer that solves 3 questions at once. We walked Mercer Street with paper cups and a borrowed umbrella. She asked what I do. I said I map messy systems until they flow. Her smile said, "Finally, scaffolding with a pulse." She talked about vision. I translated inventory, cash cycles, lead times. 2 strangers, 1 language, hers sparkling, mine invisible but load-bearing. That night I thought I'd found a partner who loved the build as much as the glow. I didn't know then. Light flatters whatever it touches until it decides you're best used as a reflection. We ducked into a narrow cafe on Crosby, the kind with brass lamps, wobbly tables, and a barista who judged milk temperatures like a surgeon. She slid me a black coffee, kept the cappuccino for herself, and laid a notebook flat between us. "Luxury without apology," she said, sketching a clean silhouette. No hardware shout, just proportion. I drew beside it. Inbound lead times, reorder points, cash conversion days. 2 columns, 1 dream. We named failure before we named the company. Counterfeits, slow freight, retail markups that kill margins and soul. She wanted intimacy at scale. I translated that to DTC with surgical forecasting, small batch drops, wait lists that create signal instead of noise. She circled a word, atelier, then wrote Whitaker above it, like it had always been waiting for ink. We built rules over coffee rings. Protect story, protect quality, protect people. I added a quiet rule I didn't say out loud. Protect her from everything the market throws. Later, I'd learned markets aren't the worst thing you face. Nights had a rhythm. My screen glowed with schemas and endpoints. Her table bloomed with swatches and Pantone chips. I stitched a backbone from rails and APIs, inventory, payments, fraud flags, 3PL hooks, while she arranged leather like a composer testing chords. When a colorway sang, I wrote logic to keep it scarce on purpose. Waitlist triggers, heat maps, drop windows that opened and closed like a heartbeat. She'd hold a sample to the lamp, oxblood, sand, a risky electric blue, and ask, "Can the system feel this?" I answered with thresholds and alerts, a recommendation engine that treated desire like a live current. We shipped at 2 a.m., celebrated with stale biscotti, and fell asleep to the hum of a job queue catching up. It felt intimate the way building does. Code compiling, edge paint drying, both of us chasing the same clean line from idea to proof. I told myself the silence was comfort, not distance, that excellence doesn't need applause. The first alerts of success arrived, so did the first requests that bent our rules. It happened on a Thursday, press preview at the Soho studio. Too much glass, too many cameras, the kind of air that tastes like bubbly and ambition. She was mid-interview, answering a question about how a small label scaled so fast without losing detail. She turned, palm open toward me like a spotlight on a quiet stage. "He's the backbone," she said. "Nothing stands without him." People clapped the way people clap for a safe truth. A photographer asked me to step in. I declined, hands still inked with Sharpie notes from a warehouse run. Later, she repeated it in a toast, voice soft enough to feel private, loud enough to be overheard. To the backbone, glass against glass. For a second, the word settled into me like a rib sliding back into place. I didn't hear the subtext. Backbones aren't meant to be seen, only used. I posted the inventory numbers that night and slept like I'd been named. The next week, the first VIP request arrived. Small, harmless, just this once. Opening day smelled like leather and thunder. A line curved past the brick. Umbrellas knocking shoulders, strangers rehearsing how they'd justify buying something they already wanted. Inside, the mirrors were kind. The light was warmer than it needed to be. We sold through the small batch drop in 90 minutes. My dashboard pulsed a soft green I'd coded for enough and secretly renamed proof. When the clouds finally broke, Soho turned silver. She tugged my sleeve outside into it. No speech, no camera, just rain dissolving our edges. We kissed by a storm drain humming like a low applause. For a moment I believed the city had agreed with us. Quality over noise, story over hype, us over everything else. Back inside, she stood on a stool and thanked the team, voice bright and generous. I watched people glow under it, then watched their glow reflect back to her. I told myself that's how a brand works. Give light, get light. That night, a buyer asked for quiet access to next month's drop. Small favor. Just this once. I said yes. Success has a sound. Camera shutters syncing with applause. Glasses clicking like metronomes. At first it thrilled me, then it got loud. PR learned her angles. She learned them faster. Panels, podcasts, profiles titled with words like muse and visionary. I watched copy that once said we become she without anyone noticing the edit but me. At fittings she stopped asking, "Does this feel like us?" and started saying, "This looks like me." Captions drifted from craft to celebrity, who wore it, who wanted it, who texted for it at midnight. I'd bring performance reports. She'd bring a stylist. I wasn't offended. I was phased out, like a line of code deprecated but left running until no one remembers what it powers. When photographers asked for a shot together, she'd laugh. "He hates the camera." I don't. I just hate what it does to truth. The brighter the light, the easier it is to miss what isn't on stage. The invitations changed next. Rooftops, penthouses, rooms where I learned how invisible a backbone can be. Penthouse ceilings, low sofas, names that open doors. My place was always a half step back and 2 degrees left, close enough to be useful, far enough to be cropped. I'd balance a glass I didn't want, nod on cue, and answer the same safe question 10 times. And what do you do? I work in operations, I'd say, the way you say, "I parked the car," when you built the engine. She handled me like wardrobe, hand at my back to position, a glance that meant smile, a squeeze that meant exit. If I drifted toward the one person actually talking supply chains, she'd appear with a joke and redirect me to weather, vacations, anything that wouldn't make her guests imagine sweat and warehouse air. People praised her eye for detail. They meant people. I learned the choreography. Laugh half beat late, keep shoulders open, never correct anyone about the numbers. The room loved the story more than the structure. Stories photograph better. On the ride home, she'd debrief my performance. That's when the line landed, light as lint, heavy as lead. Just smile and stay quiet. She said it in the car like she was brushing lint from my lapel. No heat, no fight, just policy. Just smile and stay quiet. It wasn't the words, it was the tone. Final, practiced, a line she'd said before in her head. I looked at our reflections in the window, hers bright and centered, mine ghosted in the tint, and heard something slip inside me, small but structural. I told myself she was nervous, that image feeds payroll, that this was about strategy, not hierarchy. I let the alibi sit in my chest like a borrowed key. After that, corrections multiplied. A hand on my wrist when I started to explain lead times. A quick, "He's very technical," to end a conversation that might have given me shape. The soft laugh when someone miscredited a solution I'd written at 2 a.m. "It's all us," she'd say, but the us kept shrinking. Respect doesn't explode. It erodes. It leaves dust on the tongue and silence where questions should be. That night I began to count. Spaces between us on sofas, seconds before she introduced me, months since she'd looked toward me instead of through me. I started counting because numbers don't lie when people do. 3 inches between our hips on the town car seat. 5 seconds before she introduced me, if she introduced me at all. 2 drinks before she laughed a little too hard at a stranger's touch on her elbow. 9 photos from the night, and I'm a blur in 8. In restaurants, I tracked sight lines. Her gaze moved like a spotlight skimming a stage. Donors, stylists, buyers, anyone who could amplify the story. When the beam came my way, it arrived late and left early. At home, I measured the pauses. How long the fork hovered before she asked about my day, how quickly the question emptied when the answer wasn't about her brand. I clocked her wheeze turning into eyes the way you notice seasons in New York. One day the air just bites. My dashboards pulsed honest signals, sell-through, churn, fraud flags, while the one metric that mattered most, respect, trended quietly to 0. When the numbers lined up, the pattern was simple. We were scaling everything except us. The first cancellation felt harmless. A supplier sync punted last minute, her text flashing a champagne emoji and client dinner. Big opportunity. I pushed the agenda to tomorrow, told the team to breathe. The second time, the same table at the same restaurant appeared in her stories. But the client was a cluster of beautiful strangers with perfect teeth and no purchase orders. By the fourth, I stopped moving meetings and started moving assumptions. At 7:12 p.m., she sent a selfie from the back of a black car. Don't wait up. At 1:03 a.m., I was alone in Secaucus recalibrating reorder points she'd promised to discuss. Warehouse air smells like cardboard and truth. It doesn't flatter. My inbox filled with small fires. Chargebacks. A vendor asking why his invoices were routed to a new LLC I hadn't approved. I forwarded, followed up, got silent dressed as tomorrow. Back home I set 2 plates out of habit, put one away out of respect for reality. Her key turned at 2:41 a.m. A laughter still on it. The first ping was small, a calendar invite that landed at 11:58 p.m. Subject line supplier alignment. No agenda. Location? TBD. I opened the byte ICs and skimmed the metadata out of habit, created from her phone, time zone to Manhattan, attendees hidden. Another ping the next week, same hour, same euphemism. I started a folder called Midnight Ops and saved everything there. Invites, screenshots, the quiet things people think won't matter. Texts began to read like stage directions. Running late. The meeting went long. Badge won't scan, can you reset access? Her perfume lingered on a coat that wasn't the one she left in. Car receipts hit our joint account from an address I knew by its lobby orchids, not its invoices. I mapped the nights on a grid, my warehouse notes in blue, her supplier blocks in red, and watched the overlap grow. A concierge confirmed a package drop under an LLC I didn't recognize. The LLC's mailing matched a leather importer I'd flagged once and filed away under probably fine. It wasn't fine. The next alert wasn't a calendar. It was an invoice. Same goods, new price, and a signature I didn't authorize. The invoice looked normal until it didn't. Same SKU, same tannery code, same shipment weight, different price, 22% higher. The vendor line had a new intermediary I hadn't onboarded. Park Leather Imports. I traced the remittance path. Whitaker. Park Leather. Original supplier. Money doing a little dance that adds nothing but cost and deniability. I pulled packing lists, matched carton IDs, and ran the serials against our intake photos, identical. We weren't paying for better hides, we were paying for a middleman with a polished stamp. The signature on the revised PO wasn't mine, wasn't finances, it was hers, initialed with a swirl I used to think was charming. A name surfaced in email headers and courier labels like a watermark, Aiden Park. He showed up on guest lists too. Soft openings, rooftops, the kind of rooms where numbers blur behind lighting and laughter. Strategic sourcing, she'd said once, sliding past the details. I opened a fresh tab and sketched a flow. Cost in, value out, leaks marked in red. Red bled. Cold doesn't arrive with slammed doors. It shows up in room temperature. She stopped finishing my sentences and started editing my presence. Morning used to taste like citrus and jokes. Now it tasted like emails read over coffee, my reflection hovering in the black of her phone. I'd ask about fittings. She'd nod at a point behind me. I'd share a small win, fraud down 3 points, and get, can we not do numbers at breakfast? Clarity is what pain becomes when it stops begging. I said less and watched more. The metrics that mattered didn't live on dashboards. How long before she sat next to me instead of across? How quickly she reached for her phone when silence got honest. I stopped arguing with what was obvious and started documenting what was real. Calendar pings, invoice deltas, access logs. Not to weaponize, to remember. Gaslight hates paper. At night she faced the mirror like it was a panel. I learned her prep tells, the jaw set, the breath hold, the line rehearsed. The line was coming, and I would hear it differently this time. She stood before the mirror like it was a panel and she was about to testify. Lip color, breath hold, shoulders back. I knew the choreography by now. I tried a simple bridge. We stabilized return rates this week. The new packing flow worked. A pebble tossed toward connection. "Let's not do ops tonight," she said to the glass. Not to me. The mirror got more eye contact than I did. I stepped closer, enough to share a reflection. "We could leave early, walk home, rain's coming." A soft olive branch. She adjusted an earring I'd never seen, the kind people borrow and pretend to own. "Smile more tonight," she said, smoothing a line that didn't exist. "And please, no warehouse talk. It makes people uncomfortable." Something clicked, quiet and final, like a door that never slammed because it never had to. I wasn't a partner in that reflection. I was set dressing with a pulse. Her eyes skimmed past mine, landed on her own, and stayed. I didn't argue. I memorized. You don't fix what won't look back. An hour later, Secaucus would be all fluorescent honesty and cardboard truth. And I'd prefer it. Secaucus at midnight tells the truth. No champagne, just tape guns snapping, forklifts beeping somewhere in the dark, the air tasting like cardboard and ink. I walked the aisles with a clipboard I didn't need, scanning bins I'd labeled by hand our first month. The system purred, ASN matched intake, cycle counts reconciled, fraud flags quiet. If you judged us by operations, we were perfect. But perfection felt lonely. The team still called it our brand when they talked to me, their pride clipped to my name with small, grateful smiles. In emails and interviews, it had become hers. On paper, the spine was mine, IP licensed through the holding I formed when we were both sober about risk. But paper doesn't tuck you in when a partnership goes cold. I touched a pallet corner and realized I cared more about these cartons arriving intact than about whether my marriage had. Numbers love clarity. People hide. I wasn't hiding anymore. My phone buzzed. Eleanor's name. A small discrepancy in her pension account. Small things start avalanches. My phone lit the aisle. Eleanor. The woman who ironed napkins for holidays and never raised her voice texted like a fire alarm. "Cole, could you look at my pension? A small discrepancy. Probably nothing." I called from between pallets. Her tone was crisp, careful, the way people speak when they suspect the answer and fear it. "2 withdrawals I don't recognize," she said. "Labeled Atelier Advisory Transfer. Do you handle those?" "I don't touch your accounts," I said, forehead against cool corrugate, "but I can trace descriptors." Back at the workstation, I pulled the ACH details. The strings were familiar. A transit through a fresh LLC with our brand's name glued to the front and nothing behind it. Then a hop to an importer I'd just mapped in red. Park leather sat there like a thumbprint nobody bothered to wipe. Cold clarity replaced anger. This wasn't about parties anymore. It was about lines crossed you can't charm your way back over. "Please don't tell her yet," Eleanor whispered. "Not until you're sure." "I'll get you sure," I said. I opened a new directory. Proof. Then I started backing up everything. Paranoia wears a suit called procedure. I told myself I wasn't spying. I was preserving. What happened, when, by whom? I imaged the ERP to a read-only clone and printed hashes like fingerprints you can't argue with. Invoices, packing lists, ACH descriptors, PDFs nested in folders named for dates, not feelings. Calendar exports, too. Boyd IC's files that don't care about alibis, only timestamps. Access logs, role changes, admin keys, screenshotted, timestamped, stored offsite. I forwarded vendor threads to a clean archive, then wrote a memo to my future self. What I saw, what I suspected, what would be easy to forget when the gaslight got warm. I scanned my own blind spots like shelves, where I wanted to believe her, where I'd rounded error into probably nothing. Every file I saved felt less like evidence and more like oxygen. Anger wanted a scene. Clarity wanted a ledger. I chose the ledger. At 2:13 a.m., the backups finished. The room hummed like a steady heart. Somewhere across the river, a different rhythm. Laughter, glass, a plan I wasn't in. The night before the party, the house sounded different, like a suitcase zipper held halfway. In the guest room she called her styling room, 2 garment bags were open, but not for tomorrow. The tags read, "Travel, not event." A jewelry roll sat half-packed, the kind people take when they don't plan to come back just to fetch earrings. On her desk, a new email alias on a sticky note, initials that matched a Shell LLC I'd seen on a courier label. Next to it, a business card for a lawyer I didn't know, specialty, brand transitions. Passwords had changed for security. Shipping addresses on 2 vendor portals quietly updated to a WeWork I'd never toured. In our kitchen drawer, the spare key we always left for emergencies was gone. Nothing dramatic, just absence, tidied. I stood in the doorway and watched her rehearse in the mirror, smile, breath, a line I hadn't heard yet but recognized by its posture. She was already gone. The party would just be her press release. I didn't stop her. I charged my phone, laid out a suit, and decided to go anyway, to hear the truth spoken out loud. I ironed the suit I wear when I need to be unreadable. Took the FDR down to Tribeca with the windows cracked, letting the river wind file my edges flat. I promised myself 3 things in the car. I won't argue, I won't explain, I will listen. If the end is coming, let it arrive with sound, not guesswork. The doorman said my name like a password I no longer owned. In the elevator, I checked the only dashboard that mattered. Pulse, breath, steadiness. Phone at 92%, backups verified. A small notebook in my pocket in case technology tried to make truth optional. My ring felt heavier than metal. I twisted it once and left it on. The doors opened into curated light and curated people. I clocked exits, cameras, the terrace doors propped for air. A DJ disguised as furniture. Her laugh carried before I saw her, lacquered and effortless, the kind that tells a room where to face. I wasn't there to fix it. I was there to let it declare itself. The penthouse was already performing when I arrived. Candlelight calibrated to make skin look rich, music mixed to be heard but never listened to. Floors that asked for quiet shoes. Windows pretending the skyline was part of the guest list. I stepped into a current that knew where it was flowing and noticed how quickly my edges rounded off. Her world runs on choreography. A woman at the door said my name with that half-smile people reserve for +1s. Coats vanished. A flute of something cold appeared in my hand before I asked. Someone had decided I drink champagne. Faces turned the way flowers do, toward heat. I followed their line and found it. The center of gravity wearing silk. Laughter pitched to draw orbit. I stayed near the terrace for air and quiet, watching how proximity worked here. Who got greeted, who got glanced, who got grazed. I recognized the rhythm. Praise, pose, pivot, repeat. None of it was mine, though my fingerprints were under everything that paid for it. She saw me, eventually. Not first, not last, just placed. She caught her reflection in a black window and turned it into a mirror. The private rehearsal I knew by heart, chin, breath, shoulders, went live. The smile softened, the eyes sharpened, and the room bent its knee without knowing it did. I felt the old reflex kick in. Match her tempo, smooth the edges, make the transitions clean. That's what I do. Hide the wiring so the chandelier looks like it floats. She crossed to me with a hostess hug that read, as intimacy from 10 feet away and logistics up close. Stay near, she whispered, which really meant be available and quiet. I nodded, pocketed the urge to say anything real, and became what this ecosystem rewards: agreeable negative space. People approached in curated pairs. She introduced them by outcomes, not names. Sold out in 3 minutes. Placement on 5th. The gospel of shine. When my turn to speak hovered, she filled it with a laugh and a glide to the next orbit. A camera flashed. I blinked and felt myself phase out, frame by frame. The circle tightened. Fund guys with watches that keep time in net, IRR, PR, women fluent in crisis and compliments. They asked questions shaped like praise. How does she do it? Where does she find the vision? Statements with question marks that required no answers. I stood there, a human NDA, while metrics I'd bled for got repackaged into adjectives. One investor squeezed my shoulder like he was congratulating the furniture. You must be proud, he said, facing her. A publicist air-kissed the air near my cheek and told her I had such supportive energy. When someone said supply chain, my body leaned forward. Her hand landed at my ribs, soft, directive, as if I were stepping into traffic. He's very technical, she chirped, the social equivalent of a mute button. I watched their eyes track like drones, hover, scan, move on, never once landing where the wiring runs. In this room, value wore a dress, infrastructure wore invisibility. Then the music shifted, slow, forgiving, the kind couples claim. The terrace doors parted like curtains. Then the room did that soft focus thing. Lights down a notch, edges blurred, voices dipped to velvet, and the opening bars hit. Not the exact song, but close enough that my chest knew before my head did. Our old tempo. The one from A Smaller Life. Takeout cartons on the floor, a mattress without a frame, us practicing adult hope between bills. Memory is a ruthless DJ. In 3 chords, I was barefoot on a July roof, her dress catching city wind, both of us laughing like we'd hacked New York. Back then, I led because we trusted each other not to step on toes. Now the floor was marble and the trust was gone, but the muscle memory twitched anyway. She was across the room, haloed by glass and approval. For a second, her face softened, maybe at the song, maybe at a story she liked about herself. I felt something stubborn lift my hand, not to claim, not to perform, just to test if there was anything left beneath the polish. I crossed the room through other people's reflections. I reached her as the chorus softened the room's edges. "Dance with me," I said, plain, unadorned, the way you ask for water. For half a beat, something unguarded crossed her face, then training took over. She glanced at the orbit around us, investor, publicist, the camera that always finds the center, and arranged her mouth into yes. Her hand found mine like a business card. Contact without contact. I set a careful frame, the kind you use when you don't want to spook a wild animal or a memory. We moved, technically correct, emotionally absentee, 2 people executing a basic step with advanced distance. My palm at her back met silk and staging. Her shoulder resisted the inch that turns motion into closeness. "I have to say hello to Marcus in a minute," she murmured, eyes scanning over my head at the next conversation she preferred. "Of course," I said, and tried once more to shorten the space, the way you fix a drift in code, micro, precise. Her body answered first, a quiet recoil that felt louder than a slap. Up close, her eyes had that museum glass sheen, perfect clarity that refuses to admit depth. I could see myself in them, but only as decor, a moving shape that proved the room had life. The smile she wore was surgical, a crescent applied with tweezers. It kept time with the music while we didn't. Around us, couples folded into each other, easy weight, hands finding familiar places, heads tipping toward chests like gravity was gentler for them. I tried to remember the last time her pupils softened when they landed on me, the last time looking at me meant seeing, not staging. The answer didn't come. The song did, cresting into the part that used to close the distance by itself. "Can we?" I began, a request so small it barely qualified as sound. I eased my hand an inch, inviting that simple human yes you don't think about when you still have it. Her gaze slid over my shoulder, inventorying witnesses. The smile stayed. The person left. She drew one careful breath, the kind performers take before a line meant to carry. And then she opened her mouth. She didn't whisper it to wound me privately. She projected, diaphragm and diction, like a line she'd rehearsed in the mirror. "I'd rather kiss my dog than kiss you." The room snapped to attention the way an audience does when a punchline lands. A few gasps arrived late to the scene. Most people went straight to laughter, bright, brittle, relieved. Relief is what people feel when cruelty confirms the story they prefer. Glasses tilted, a hand clapped. Someone said savage, like it was a compliment. I didn't step back. I cataloged. The tightening in her jaw after the word dog, the satisfied exhale of the investor who'd been circling, the way a phone appeared in someone's hand because humiliation performs well at scale. My face stayed neutral out of muscle memory. My chest did something quieter, like a string pulled until it sings a note only you can hear. Respect dies in public the way stars die. Light first, then heat. What comes after is gravity. She wasn't finished. Lines like that come with encores. Laughter has textures. This kind cut like chipped crystal, pretty from afar, jagged up close. It bounced off marble and tall windows, multiplied by surfaces designed to flatter sound. People laughed into their hands, into their phones, into each other's shoulders like cruelty was a shared joke they'd all been waiting to tell. A flute chimed against a ring, somewhere ice settled in a glass like a tiny landslide. I watched the echo choose its favorites, those who laughed first, those who laughed loudest, those who laughed and then checked my face to see if they were safe. The DJ smirked without meaning to. A publicist whispered, "Iconic," mistaking me for a prop in her client's origin story. My body wanted to move, to flee or explode. I did neither. I let the room log itself. Who recorded, who recoiled, who pretended to cough instead of laugh. Pain didn't roar. It clarified. It took a highlighter to every decision that got us here and left the rest blank. She turned slightly, hunting the next angle, breath steady, eyes bright. There's always a follow-up when the first hit lands. She let the encore fly like confetti. "You don't meet my standards." There it was, the thesis. Not a crack in the wall, the blueprint of it. The room loved it. Standards are currency here. They buy permission to be unkind. A hand squeezed her shoulder in approval. A phone caught the moment from 3 angles. Someone waited for me to shatter so they could tell the story better later. Instead, something inside me aligned like a level finding center. If there are standards, there must be terms. If there are terms, there must be signatures. And if there are signatures, there must be leverage. I thought of quiet things no one in that room applauds: version control, audit trails, admin logs, the licensing agreement that lives in a folder labeled boring until it isn't. I thought of the difference between a chandelier and a ceiling joist, and which one keeps a house upright when the power goes out. My face did what faces do when a punch finally makes sense. I smiled, not at the joke, but at the math that follows it. Clarity doesn't arrive with trumpets. It arrives like a pane of glass you didn't know you were pressing your face against, suddenly clean. The line, the laughter, the phones tilted for better angles. It all sorted the room for me. Who needed to be persuaded? Who needed to be remembered? Who needed to be removed from access? I felt the ache, sure, but it narrowed into a beam. It lit the unglamorous architecture I'd built and the signatures people forget they gave. It highlighted clocks, exits, and 3 small levers no one clinking glasses ever thinks about. Ownership, control, compliance. Not rage, not spectacle. Terms. I didn't speak. Words were for the stage. I was done auditioning. I set my glass on a tray that wasn't looking for it, looked once at the skyline that thinks it invented shine, and chose not to compete with the music. Hurt points. It pointed me to the door. By midnight, I wouldn't be the man on the dance floor. I'd be the hand on a switch you can't see until it flips. I didn't look back for a coat check or a goodbye. The elevator swallowed the penthouse glow and fed me a mirror of myself I could finally stand to see. Face calm, pulse steady, wedding band heavier than it looked. The doors opened to a lobby that didn't know it had hosted a public execution. Outside, the air had teeth. A town car idled. I waved it off and took a yellow cab because I wanted the rattle, the honest noise of a city that never pretends to love you. The driver asked for an address. I gave him one I wouldn't reach. The music from 30 floors up still bled through a window somewhere, thin as memory. I let it fade until all that remained was the hum of tires and the arithmetic in my head. Who owned what? Who could flip what? Who had signed what without reading? I opened my phone, then closed it. Not yet. Breathe, align, act. At the next light, I asked the driver for Wi-Fi. "Yeah," he said, tapping his hotspot on. I slid my laptop out. The plan stood up. The backseat light carved a small island in the dark. Just me, a humming battery, and a city flicking past like a Morse code I suddenly understood. I didn't type fast, I typed clean. First, I checked the clock against a list I keep for bad nights. Contracts worth reading twice, services that listen when you whisper the right word. I pulled up the licensing agreement everyone signs and no one remembers. The clauses looked like they always do. Harmless, boring, patient. I verified hashes on the ERP clone, confirmed the admin role map, and stared at the switch I'd built for emergencies that didn't have feelings. Ownership isn't drama. It's documentation. Control isn't volume. It's permissions. 3 levers, 3 emails, 3 logs that would hold up to daylight. Lever 1. Revoke rights to the backbone. Code, domain, keys. Switch to maintenance mode and audit. Lever 2. Trigger the fulfillment clause. Pause anything touched by the new intermediary. Lever 3. Escalate anomalies to payments. Compliance on, movement off. The cab hit a pothole. My cursor didn't. I exhaled once, long. Move 1 waits for midnight. Midnight is when systems tell the truth. I logged into the console that lives behind a dull URL and two-factor prompts no one but me respects. Harris Holdings, DE, the entity people glaze over in meetings, sat there like a locked toolbox with my name on it. I opened the license ledger and read the clause I wrote for rainy seasons like this. Material misrepresentation or suspected fraud triggers immediate suspension of use rights to proprietary systems. Boring on paper. Beautiful at night. I flipped the ERP to maintenance mode, pinned a banner that sounded like a routine update, and downgraded every brand admin to read-only. API keys rolled like fresh locks on a door you forgot you owned. The domain registrar confirmed my contact. The DNS failover test blinked green. I exported the actions to a tamper-evident log and emailed a neutral notice from the holding. Temporary suspension pending review. No adjectives, just timestamps. Somewhere, a dashboard went dark. Not broken, paused. There's a difference. One is chaos. The other is control. I checked the clock. Move 2 belongs to the warehouse. Secaucus waits for no one. I called the night supervisor's line because email is for deniability, and I wanted a voice. Luis, it's me. Change of control protocol. Flag all orders touched by the new intermediary. Effective now. No drama, just switches inside people. The COC clause we'd baked into the 3PL MSA wasn't sexy. On credible risk, pause, audit, quarantine. He read it back like scripture. Dock doors 3 and 4 sealed. Pick waves canceled for SKUs mapped to that intermediary. Cartons routed to cage B. Chain of custody labels on. Photos snapped, time stamped. Cycle counts on adjacent bins. Badges for 2 temps revoked. Their names matched a vendor headcount I didn't approve. Cameras on the inspection lane stayed red dot recording. I pushed an EDI notice to retailers. Slight delay pending quality review, our brand's way of saying we're not shipping lies. Then I watched the WMS quiet down from sprint to idle, like a heart rate easing after a scare. This wasn't sabotage, it was oxygen. Anything else? Luis asked. Yeah, I said. If anyone asks, this is a routine integrity audit. I hung up, opened the payments dashboard, and reached for lever 3. Payments don't care about gossip, they care about risk. I opened the acquirer portal, authenticated past the second factor, and pulled the anomaly report I'd been feeding quiet breadcrumbs for weeks. Spike patterns tied to that intermediary, mismatched descriptors, refunds orbiting the same cards. I submitted a compliance hold request under our internal policy. Credible suspicion, documented variance, third-party exposure. No adjectives, only numbers, time, and paths. The processor's risk inbox isn't human at midnight, but it's awake. I attached the audit trail, invoice deltas, access logs, vendor hops, the 3PL quarantine notice. I didn't say freeze my wife's brand. I said halt disbursement on flows tainted by these identifiers pending review. AML doesn't argue with elegance, it argues with links. A status flag flipped from green to amber. Payouts scheduled for morning shifted to pending. Money didn't stop existing, it just stopped moving. And movement is the part most people confuse with life. I saved confirmations to the tamper log and sat back. 3 levers, 3 clicks, no shouting. At 0037, the ERP would drop to maintenance. At 0110, Secaucus would slow its pulse. At 0140, the wire would wait, and the phones would start. 0037. The banner slid across the top of the screen like a hospital curtain. Scheduled maintenance. Brief service interruption. My cursor hovered over the confirm key a heartbeat longer than pride needed, then I pressed it. The site stayed pretty. Hero images still loaded, product pages still flirted, but the spine eased into read-only. Carts functioned like mannequins. They wore clothes but couldn't walk out. Alerts arrived in polite tones. Can't push the lookbook. Price fields locked. A social manager pinged. Are we down? I replied with the sentence you write for nights like this. Short maintenance window, no action required. I watched admin roles gray out, API keys rotate, audit logs print their quiet poetry. Somewhere in Soho, a laptop refreshed and found a door that used to open. My phone lit the cab ceiling. 2 messages from her, one from a number that likes rooftop bars. Is something wrong with the back end? Another. Fix it. Now. I let both sit. I don't fix what isn't broken. I enforce what was signed. 0038. Cooling fan settled into a steadier hum. 0110. Secaucus exhaled. The conveyor lights went from sprint green to a thinking amber, then to still. You can feel silence in a warehouse. It has weight. Luis came on the radio with the voice he uses for fire drills and snowstorms. COC active. All lanes tied to the intermediary. Pause, photo, cage. Forklifts eased to brakes. Pickers peeled labels and reprinted them with hold in red. Chain of custody slips clipped to carton corners like passports. I watched the WMS reflected in real time. Waves canceled, totes rerouted, skews quarantined to cage B. Cameras above the inspection lane blinked their red dots steady. 2 temp badges went cold mid-scan. Security walked them out without a scene. Routine integrity check, Luis told them, same as I told him. Truth doesn't need volume to be true. I pushed a scripted heads up to customer care. Minor QC delays on select items. Thank you for your patience. We owe customers honesty, not panic. A picture pinged in, rows of cartons inside welded wire, tags crisp, timestamps right. That's what control looks like, boring and undeniable. 0128. I closed the warehouse tab and opened payments. 0140. The subject line arrived with the calm of a surgeon. Suspicious activity. Hold initiated. No exclamation points. Just a reference number, the word pending, and a list of descriptors I'd fed the system like breadcrumbs. Payouts scheduled for morning slid into a waiting room with no magazines. The dashboard softened from motion to stillness. Clean, firm, reversible if truth deserved it. If. Risk doesn't use adjectives, it uses links. The email mirrored back my attachments, invoice deltas, vendor hops, the 3PL quarantine note, now stamped by someone who doesn't care about our dinner table fights. It felt like standing in a quiet courtroom where only the evidence speaks. Then the phone started. Unknown numbers. Then known, the PR friend who calls gossip narrative, an investor whose voice drops when money does, a supplier who suddenly remembered my first name. I let them stack into a little skyline of missed calls. Control isn't answering, it's deciding when to. Her text came last, bright with entitlement even in grayscale. What did you do? Fix it. I typed 3 words and didn't send them yet. Followed the rules. Her bubble lit the screen again. What did you do? I watched the 3 dots hunt for an angle and typed without heat. Followed the rules. Rules we drafted when we still believed in us. Rules that say if product integrity is in doubt, systems pause. If money moves through shadows, payments wait for light. If access is abused, keys change. Not revenge, recourse. She called. I let it ring into the neutral voice that says, leave a message. Another text. You're overreacting. You're destroying everything we built. I stared at we like a word in a foreign language I used to speak. Another call, this time from the intermediary himself, the one whose invoices grew 22% prettier with no added value. Decline. I sent her the blandest sentence I know. Temporary suspension pending review. Please route inquiries to counsel. It read like corporate anesthesia because that's what it was, for both of us. She fired back a threat dressed as a plea. Undo it or we're done. The city slid past my window, neon reflected in puddles. I typed, we've been done since respect left the room. I didn't hit send. I didn't need to. People will say I burned it down. They'll point at timestamps and holds and think the switch was the fire. But fire doesn't start with a light. It starts with dry timber and a room that pretends it isn't stacking kindling. The clauses I pulled weren't matches. They were mirrors. They reflected what was already there. Fake margins glossed as strategy, invoices with perfume instead of value, a brand that sold integrity while routing around it. Systems don't care who you kiss, they care what you sign. We had agreed that truth outranks velocity, that quality outranks convenience, that money without provenance waits. I didn't invent those rules, I just stopped apologizing for them. By dawn, the machine still looked beautiful to anyone peering through the glass. The homepage loaded, the feed glimmered, the showroom smelled like leather and rain. But underneath, The engine idled with the hood up. No motion without inspection, no stories without proof. What collapsed wasn't mine. It was the scaffolding of a lie that ran out of places to hide. Morning has a way of telling you what last night meant. Mine did it in push alerts. Whitaker Atelier under investigation. The words wore the calm font outlets reserved for market moves and indictments. No photos of us, just the logo, cropped tight like a brand, can answer questions people won't. Calls stacked again, this time with signatures, reporters asking for context, investors requesting clarity, a PR email proposing language that turned facts into fog. I made coffee in a quiet kitchen and read the copy twice. Sources close to operations, compliance review, payments paused pending audit. They'd found the shape without the story. Good. Stories can wait. Facts can't. I sent one statement through counsel. We'll cooperate fully. Customer orders affected by the review will be addressed transparently. No adjectives, no villains. Just the promise I could keep. Outside, delivery trucks hissed at the curb, Manhattan pretending not to notice. Inside, I watched the market open and felt nothing I'd call victory. Relief, maybe. Gravity, certainly. Her name didn't quote, mine didn't either. The brand spoke as a thing, not a pair. Silence arrived dressed as strategy. Her accounts went dark, no captions, no "we're excited," not even a repost. The PR firm sent me boilerplate about monitoring the situation, then asked for access I no longer granted. Suppliers pinged her. Auto replies did the talking. Interns texted me question marks I couldn't reasonably answer. Aiden did what men like Aiden do, evaporated. His showroom shutters stayed down past opening. The orchid in the lobby drooped without an audience. A courier I trust said his Monday pickups were canceled indefinitely. The doorman on his block remembered a late suitcase, an early car. A rumor traced a dawn flight under a different middle initial, close enough to pass if no one looked too hard. His number rang once, then nothing. Disappearing is easier when your value was vapor to begin with. I watched the city pretend nothing had shifted and thought about how loud absence can be when you finally listen to it. Silence isn't neutral, it's a shape. Mid-morning, my phone lit with a new caller ID that didn't care about branding or optics. Special Agent Renee Morales, FBI. Cole Harris? The voice was steady, Midwestern edges sanded by New York years. Special Agent Renee Morales. We met at 26 Federal Plaza under lights that don't flatter. No small talk, just a clear table and a legal pad. She asked for narrative. I gave her sequence, dates, deltas, who touched what, when. Not anger. Order. I slid a drive across. ERP clone hashes, invoice trails, access logs, the 3PL quarantine memo, the payments hold confirmations. She didn't blink at the volume. She blinked at the coherence. You documented this before last night? Yes. Why? Because truth forgets if you don't write it down. They copied, verified, and returned the drive with a chain of custody receipt that felt more like oxygen than paper. I answered what I could, declined what I should, and signed where signing meant I saw, I saved, I'm here. No theatrics, just spine. Walking out, the city looked the same, steam from grates, taxis impatient, a pigeon's bored hop. Only my feet knew we'd crossed a line, from rumor to record. By afternoon, another call waited, for someone who never thought she'd need to dial me first, Eleanor. Eleanor didn't weep like a victim. She wept like a ledger finally admitting loss. The call began formal. Cole, do you have a minute? And ended with porcelain-fragile silence while I read line items she never authorized. Dates, descriptors, the shell that borrowed our name and took her money. I kept my voice low and procedural, the way you do when pain needs rails. I thought I raised her to know better, she said, breath catching on raised. I didn't answer that. I told her what would happen next, the FBI receipt numbers, the bank's hold, how restitution works when courts turn nouns into checks. I'm sorry, I said, useless but necessary. You deserved a daughter who guarded you, not a brand that used you. I defended her to everyone, she whispered. To you. I know. And I did. There are rows for that too. Trust given, trust spent, trust gone. Before we hung up, she asked if I hated her daughter. I told her I hated what contempt does to people who start out soft. When the line died, the apartment made a sound I'd missed for months. Nothing at all. Silence returned like a stray that remembered my doorstep. No playlists, no rehearsal lines drifting from a bathroom, no shoes left like punctuation in the hall. Just the hum of the fridge and a city exhaling through double panes. I made coffee with both hands for the first time in months. No phone wedged to my ear, no apology drafted in my head. The mug went where it wanted on the table. I let the ring it left stay. I walked the rooms and felt ownership settle into ordinary things. A lamp I'd fixed, a hinge that never squeaked because I'd listened to it early. It's strange what you grieve once the spectacle ends. Not the parties or the press, but the small domestic grammar of two people who once meant we and then stopped conjugating. I checked the dashboards out of habit, then closed them. The only metric I cared about was pulse. Mine, steady. The apartment's, calm. Relief is quiet. So is dignity. The phone buzzed with opinions I didn't need. One text stood out. Do you regret it? Regret is for accidents. This was a decision. Measured, signed, time-stamped. When people asked, I thought of the ledger I kept. Respect debits. Truth credits. The night a room laughed and told me who it was. No, I said, and let the word sit without decoration. No, because pausing in a machine you built when it lies is not betrayal, it's maintenance. No, because love without respect is tenancy, month to month at the mercy of someone else's mood. No, because money that can't explain itself isn't income, it's a fuse. They wanted qualifiers. Not really. In a way, sometimes at night. I gave them the quiet version of a boundary. No. Then I did dishes, answered one email, fixed a cabinet hinge that had been pleading for weeks. My body believed me before my mouth did. I slept 6 straight hours for the first time all summer. This wasn't triumph. It was alignment. My actions finally matching what the evidence had been saying for months. Morning brought new asks, statements, meetings, favors. One of them wasn't a ask at all. It was a knock you don't ignore. I kept hearing the word revenge like it explained me. It doesn't. Revenge needs an audience. What I did needed a signature and a clock. I didn't scorch earth. I turned off lights I pay for. I didn't punish. I enforced. There's a difference men learn when they've built things with their hands and names, maintenance versus malice. Stopping the insult wasn't a speech. It was a boundary. No more pretending contempt is style. No more subsidizing disrespect because the photos look good. No more calling theft strategy. I wasn't proving my worth to anyone in that penthouse. I was proving it to the man in my mirror, the one who still has to like himself when rooms go dark. People think strength is loud. It isn't. Strength is quiet paperwork and a straight back. It's letting the record speak and your phone stay face down. It's refusing to audition for people who sold their seats for a better view. If there's a lesson here, it's simple. When respect leaves, you leave the door unlocked behind it. Loss doesn't scream, it unplugs. The showroom lights still worked, but the calendar didn't. Retailers reconsidered timing. Influencers found new muses overnight. The PR firm that once answered in 7 minutes needed internal approvals and then stopped replying at all. Her circle, built on reflected light, pivoted like sunflowers. No statement, no loyalty, just angle. I walked past the Soho glass one morning and saw it like a museum after hours. Beautiful and closed. A week later, the signage came down. She wasn't there to watch. Maybe that was mercy. People sent me photos with captions that invited victory laps. I didn't take them. Schadenfreude is just grief with a mask on, and I'd had enough masks. Eleanor called to say she was safe. A junior from the studio texted to thank me for severance I didn't owe. The bank sent another update. Funds reserved for restitution, not stories. Good. I didn't feel taller. I felt right-sized. The work now wasn't about endings. It was about building something honest with the people who never left when the lights did. I put my name on the door I used to hide behind. Harris Ops. No mystique, no founder myth, just what it does on the tin. Build spines that don't lie. I called Luis first, then Maya and Riley. Same rigor, I said, cleaner rooms. We rented a modest space in the garment district that smells like fabric, coffee, and decisions. The wall rules are short. Document, disclose, deliver. If we can't explain a number, we don't ship a story. The first client wasn't flashy, a heritage maker with more soul than systems. We mapped their mess, stood up an ERP that fit like work boots, rewrote their returns flow so honesty wasn't expensive. I priced our time like it has dignity and paid our people on the dot. No midnight supplier meetings, just calendars that mean what they say. I slept. I cooked. I learned the names of the guys who fix our freight elevator. Transparency turned out to be a sedative and a stimulant. One morning, an envelope slid under the studio door. No return address. Inside, an invitation to speak, and a question I hadn't asked myself out loud yet. The invitation asked me to share my journey. Journeys sell. Explanations do too. I set the card beside my coffee and let the steam blur the print. A year ago, I would have rehearsed a narrative with beats and lessons and a quote you could post. Now I believed in smaller verbs. Cook, sleep, build, pay, call your mother back. I walked to work through a city that never asks why you keep going, only whether you do. The studio opened with the cheap bell I installed myself. Riley waved. Maya slid a PO across the table that balanced clean. Luis sent a photo of a palette wrapped right. This is what a second chance looks like. Not applause, not headlines, continuity. When people ask for closure, they're usually asking for theater. The record already closed it for me. Timestamps, receipts, a quiet chain of custody of my own life. I don't need to explain to anyone who wasn't there, and I don't need to convince those who were. I emailed back, happy to speak about operations and integrity. About us? No, about work. That's the part that won't lie to me. A year is a strange tape measure. Buildings don't move, but weight does. I'm still in New York. Same subway smell, same steam from grates, and everything sits easier on my ribs. The apartment learned my name again. Plants not dying, pans with the right kind of scratches, a mug I reach for without thinking. I run the bridge some mornings and don't count my breaths. I listen to them. I can pass the old Soho block without bracing. Glass is just glass when it isn't a mirror. Work has a quiet hum I trust. We invoice on Fridays, pay on Mondays, and nobody texts urgent at 11:58 p.m. I eat dinner at a table, not a laptop. I know the barista's kid likes dinosaurs and the deli guy's back is finally better. The city didn't soften, I did. Turns out lightness isn't what leaves, it's what you put down. Sometimes I catch my reflection and don't look away. That used to feel like vanity. Now it feels like alignment. When the old studio folded, the fallout didn't care about fault. It cared about rent. Assistants, cutters, a receptionist who knew every courier by first name, good people left holding boxes. I kept a standing hour on Fridays for anyone from that roster. We rebuilt resumes, translated chaos into competencies, managed 200 SKU drops under volatile lead times, reduced RMA by 12% via packaging redesign. I wrote references like affidavits, dates, results, what I saw at 2 a.m. when integrity actually shows. A pattern emerged. Doors opened faster when my name sat under theirs. You didn't have to, one pattern maker said, smoothing her portfolio like a tablecloth. I did, I said. You carried weight I put on your shoulders. Placements stuck. One at a heritage leather shop in Red Hook, another at a quiet atelier in Nolita, two into ops at Harris Ops because I'd be an idiot not to. They started a group chat and named it Real Boss. I told them to rename it Payday, but the joke kept. That word landed where applause never did. It felt like proof. It came in a beige envelope with a federal seal that makes even junk mail sit up straight. No drama, just heavy paper and the kind of serif that doesn't bluff. Special Agent Renee Morales thanked me for timely, organized cooperation, for chain of custody logs that materially accelerated asset recovery, for choosing documentation over spectacle. There was a case number, a restitution fund reference, and a line about victims who'd see money because the spine held. I read it at my kitchen counter with a mug that finally has a permanent place. The letter didn't celebrate, it verified. It said the quiet things out loud, that hashes matter, that timestamps outlive headlines, that boring is a virtue when truth needs a vehicle. At the bottom, a sentence I won't forget. Most people bring stories. You brought proof. I slid the letter into a folder marked Kept, next to warranties, a birth certificate, and a lease I signed for myself. An email pinged before I closed the drawer. Court dates, penalties, the formal unraveling of what style once hid. Courtrooms don't care about angles. Fluorescents flatten everyone. She arrived in a suit that tried to say competent instead of charmed. It almost worked until the clerk read amounts out loud. Restitution here, civil penalties there, fees like small hammers. No cameras inside, just the frictionless sound of paper moving truth from rumor to record. The judge spoke in numbers and statutes, the grammar of consequence. I watched the light leave the idea of her, the part that once turned rooms into mirrors. No entourage, no applause, only a pen that wouldn't write at first, and a hand that finally stopped shaking long enough to sign. Jewelry looks different under fluorescent honesty. So does certainty. When it ended, the hallway filled with quiet reporters practicing neutral faces. She passed within arm's reach and kept her eyes on a middle distance that used to be mine. I didn't feel bigger. I felt accurate. Outside, winter sun made the steps glare like a lesson. I buttoned my coat and chose the street without microphones. We sat on a stone bench 2 blocks from the courthouse, heat leaking out of the city like a tired secret. Eleanor's gloves were immaculate, her eyes weren't. She held herself like porcelain carries tea, delicately, determined not to spill. "I'm sorry," she said, each word chosen like a plate you only use for guests. "For what I didn't ask, for what I defended, for the way I spoke to you when I thought loyalty meant silence." I let the apology land, not to punish it with speed. "We both learned something," I said. "You about her, me about me." She half laughed, half broke. "What did you learn?" "That love without respect is a costume," I said. "And costumes fit until they don't." We talked logistics, restitution timelines, safe accounts, the way trust has to be rebuilt like a handrail, slow, weight-tested. She pressed a folded thank you note into my palm, old world neat. "You steadied what I couldn't see," she whispered. When we stood, she looked smaller and somehow freer. I walked back toward the office thinking about record-keeping of a different kind. I wrote it on a Sunday with the windows cracked and the city sounding like it always does. Delivery trucks, a dog, someone practicing scales. No names, no gossip, no victory laps. Just the boring truth told clean. What partnership looks like when it's real, what it costs when it's performative, how to write rules before you need them, how to leave when those rules get mocked. I kept it practical. 5 checks for shared decisions, 3 signals you're being managed instead of met, a template clause anyone can hand their lawyer tomorrow, ownership, access, compliance. I hit publish, closed the laptop, and started a pot of beans. By dinner, my inbox was different. By Monday, my phone was a lighthouse. A founder in Austin wrote, "We added your clause, slept for the first time in weeks." A nurse in Ohio said, "Thank you for naming the quiet disrespect that made me small." A guy in Detroit, "You saved me 10 years. It wasn't viral like fireworks. It was viral like scaffolding, showing up where something heavy needed holding. The emails didn't read like fan mail. They read like discharge papers." A carpenter in Boise, "Your piece made me realize my house wasn't a home, just a showroom for her contempt. I packed a bag." A teacher in Queens, "I stopped explaining myself to someone committed to misunderstanding me." A woman in Tulsa, "I copied your clause into our vendor agreement. He called me difficult. I called it Tuesday." They didn't ask for advice. They reported departures, quiet exits from rooms where respect had been evicted. Some stayed and set boundaries. Some left and kept their names. A few just wrote one sentence, proof of life. "I slept." I answered as plainly as I'd written. "Good. Document. Disclose. Deliver. To yourself first." At night, I scrolled slowly, letting their relief recalibrate mine. It's one thing to steady your own floorboards, it's another to hear hammers in other houses. The internet can feel like noise until it sounds like building. I closed the laptop and stood at the window. New York looked the same. I didn't. I could think of her without flinching. Hate is heavy. It keeps you in the room you left. I set it down the day I understood the marriage I missed wasn't the one I had. It was a rendering, a glossy mock-up that never shipped. What she did was cruel. What I did was necessary. What the truth did was merciful. Now when her name crosses my mind, it arrives like weather, noticed, prepared for, passing. I can remember the good without bargaining with the bad, Rain on Soho brick, coffee rings on a paper plan, the first time our system sang. I can also remember the mirror lines, the midnight meetings, the laughter like broken crystal, without letting any of it decide my dimensions. Gratitude doesn't absolve, it clarifies. I'm grateful for the lesson that respect is a load-bearing wall, not decor, that love without it is staging, that boundaries are not punishments, they're floor plans. She taught me by violating what mattered. I learned by refusing to. If I ever raise a glass to that chapter, it won't be to celebrate her fall. It'll be to honor the smaller, sturdier country I came home to inside myself. Morning in this city doesn't ask how you slept. It hands you air that tastes like metal and motion and tells you to decide. I grind beans, boil water, and let the coffee come out a little too bitter on purpose. Proof I'm awake. No sugar, no cream, no story, just what it is. I lace my shoes and run the river path past dog walkers and the same man stretching at the same lamppost. The skyline does its quiet flex, I don't. Back home, I water plants that used to die on me, answer 2 emails with full sentences, and ignore the reflex to check anyone's feed. I text the team, ship the truth, hold the rest. They send a thumbs up and a photo of a palette wrapped right. That still does more for me than applause ever did. I call my mother. I fix a drawer that sticks. I sign one new client who liked the clause more than the pitch. Small, solid verbs. The cup goes empty and I feel proportional. Not large, not small. Aligned. I used to think strength meant flame. Proof you can burn what hurt you. It doesn't. Strength is the hand that reaches for the breaker, not the match. It's the quiet enough that turns a spectacle into a record, a collapse into a boundary. She said she'd rather kiss her dog than kiss me. That line didn't end me. It ended the illusion I kept nursing. It taught me the only approval worth chasing is my own, and the only audience that matters is the mirror at 6 a.m. I didn't win by destroying a brand. I won by refusing to be managed by contempt, by choosing paperwork over performance, by choosing a life that can explain itself. Letting go wasn't surrender. It was alignment, of facts, of values, of the way I move through rooms that no longer decide my size. If you've ever been underestimated, remember, you don't need to retaliate to win. Just live truthfully, day after day, clause after clause, breath after breath. That's the most elegant revenge there is.